Our next guest, Dr. Al Mohler Jr., is the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, one of the world's largest seminaries. He hosts the podcast, The Briefing and Thinking in Public. He's a prolific writer whose most recent book, The Gathering Storm, Secularism, Culture, and the Church, was released earlier this year. Dr. Mohler's no stranger to standing for the truth in the face of cultural opposition. So we're so grateful that he is joining the virtual Values Voter Summit here tonight. Dr. Mohler, welcome.
Tony, it's great to be with you and with all those gathered with you, virtually and in person.
Well, first off, I want to acknowledge that you're coming to us from Louisville, Kentucky, an undisclosed location there in Louisville. But today, in all seriousness, a former police officer was indicted on charges connected to the raid where Breonna Taylor was killed, but no charges on Breonna Taylor's death. And the media reports that we're getting show a potential for escalation. So this is certainly one of those issues we need to be praying about as we see a string of these types of incidents occurring across the nation, resulting in civil unrest. And tonight, obviously, there's concern about violence there in Louisville. Let me just ask you this, Dr. Mohler, as we see these, it's like a repeat. We see these things happening again and again. As Christians, how should we respond to crises like these?
Well, Tony, what a great question. You know, we as Christians know that we are to seek righteousness and justice. Those are mandates given to us by God. But human beings through the long course of human history, and Christians thinking about this seriously for 2 millennia, understand that justice comes by means of the rule of law, and it never comes by any other means. And the rule of law never achieves perfect justice. And in this life, we never actually will know perfect justice. Only God can execute perfect justice. But in the United States, what we have is a system of laws, not of men, as we often say. And that meant that today, for example, Attorney General Daniel Cameron here in Kentucky had to make a ruling according to the law as special prosecutor. And I think he set out that case just extremely well. And he set the contrast well, too. We either have the rule of law or we have mob justice. And as I often say, 2 words that never go together are mob justice. And we need to pray for peace on the streets of our nation, and very troubled by some of the events that are taking place. We don't say that we live in a perfect world and there are no problems. We as Christians know better than that. But we understand that the rule of law is how these issues have to be addressed. And without respect for the rule of law and without allowing the rule of law to move forward, then we doom ourselves to nothing more than whatever any group at any given time will call justice. We're not called merely to do what we think is right and call it justice. We're called to pursue justice.
You and I spoke about this earlier on my radio program about, the fact is you'll never achieve justice through lawlessness. It just doesn't work that way. We also talked about what you see as the most significant issues facing our nation as we move into this 2020 election. What are those issues that the values voters should be watching, praying about, speaking to, and standing up for?
You know, Tony, in the 2020 election, we face, in this context of this remarkable year, we face the fact that finally the mask is off, so to speak. The gloves are off. Now we find out that there are those who are calling for basically the undoing of the American experiment and replacing it with something else. We see those who are saying that the United States is, by its very existence, an unredeemable project. And the radical nature of frankly, what's being advocated by so many in the public square these days, it's final honesty after what we've known was that intention for a very long time. And so you see the subversion of the courts, and the courts turned into engines of social liberalism. You see how the school systems and higher academia have been basically taken over by what is rightly called the adversary culture. And we as Christians have to understand that now we're being told right out loud what we should have known, and that is that we're down to fundamental issues. And of course, the most fundamental of all is the sanctity of human life. And here we are in 2020, and the choice could not be more obvious. And it's a forced choice. Americans are either going to stand for the sanctity of human life or they're going to subvert it, one or the other.
You know, it really is becoming easier in a way because it's so discernible. It's black and white. There's really very little gray area. You know, when I look at what's happening on the streets, and Dr. Mohler, I mean, I know you look at it this way, but I look at this from a biblical worldview. So all these events that are occurring around us, we also consider the spiritual dynamics. I have to believe there is a relationship between the lawlessness, the looting, the unrest, and the fact that our churches have been shuttered for months now. Now, let me just say, I supported the initial call for the churches, you know, to close just for, you know, the first 2 weeks, then it turned into a month to slow the spread. But we're now going on 6 months. At what point should the churches be looking at this and questioning the motives of government and their mandate from God?
You know, Tony, another really good question. I think what we see is the fact that some politicians have taken this COVID as an opportunity for overt hostility to religious congregations and especially to Christian churches. And that overt hostility is what we have to confront. No government authority has a right to say that church isn't essential. No government authority has the right to tell us how we are to order our worship services. And no government has the authority to say that Christian churches or other religious gatherings can be uniquely discriminated against. Where there are reasonable, temporary, generally applicable rules, well, I think we'll all understand that, you know, but that's not what we're looking at in some cases. In D.C. with Mayor Bowser and in California with Governor Newsom, we're looking at unrealistic, unconstitutional, opportunistic, and overtly hostile actions. And at that stage, we have to confront. And we need to be clear. I don't think we should be saying that that we want to escape and have an escape clause from the rightful orders that are given to people in the society out of concern for health. That we respect zoning laws, even though, or we contest them in court. We respect what the fire marshal says is the limitation of how many people can sit in a room. But it better not be different for a Christian church than it is for the local high school and its auditorium. It better not be any different for a casino, as we have seen in the state of Nevada unconstitutionally, than for a Christian church. And I think what we're seeing right now is a political opportunism that is actually overt hostility. And we've got to confront that.
I do agree with you because as I see it, we're setting a precedent by what we will tolerate. And I'm concerned that this may come back again if the church simply sits silently, knowing that we're being treated differently in a way that prevents us from carrying out our mission.
You know, Tony, it also, to me, underlines the importance of the judiciary because we are looking at the fact that with the Supreme Court seat now, you know, very much in question, a lot of these questions are eventually going to be settled by the United States Supreme Court. It's going to matter hugely who sits on that court. And what we've seen in the last several months is it takes a majority, a clear majority on that court to be able to get the cases that are really important before the court. I've been, as you've been, very disappointed that, for instance, the case of that Nevada church didn't even get heard by the Supreme Court. Clearly, we've got work to do there. And now we have the opportunity.
That may be changing very, very soon. Dr. Al Mohler, thanks so much for joining us at the Values Voter Summit. Always great to talk with you, my friend.
And with you, Tony. Thank you so much. God bless you all.